Everyone for attending our webinar today. I'd like to introduce our presenter, Frank Ball. Frank has been a principal consultant for Adcap for 2 years now. He brings a lot of value to our organization and has helped us pinpoint a solution for our customers' biggest pain, their annual maintenance renewals. With that being said, Frank, the ball is yours.
Awesome. No pun intended there, right? Let me just go ahead and share my desktop with everybody. Thanks for attending. Today we have kind of a loose agenda. I want to talk about our tool set and our approach to the marketplace, and then I really want to dive into the tool set and let you take a look at that itself. So on the agenda today, I'm going to talk about our engagement framework and go through our methodology. A couple things that I think that are very important here is that you understand my background. I was at Cisco for 5.5 years. Day one on the job, I kind of lucked out. My largest account in Atlanta was a company by the name of S1, and the CIO was a personal friend of mine, Vic Syracuse. And I picked up the phone and called Vic and said, hey, you're my largest customer, haven't bought anything for years. I'm going to be out there to sit down and talk about a strategy and how we can help work together, you know, with your company and Cisco. He said, great, I can't wait to see you. I showed up day 3 on the job in his office, and he took a piece of paper and threw it across the desk and said, this is my maintenance renewal. It went up 25% from last year to this year. I have no idea why. This is your problem. Go fix it. Good to see you. I don't want to talk to you until it's done. So it set me off on a 3-month journey, and I learned a tremendous amount about, you know, the ins and the outs and the woes and the pains of Cisco SmartNet renewal. Fast forward the clock, this was back in 2003, so almost 11 years later, I got a lot of experience with a lot of the other vendors in the marketplace. So HP, IBM, Dell, Apple, Lenovo, Microsoft, everything hardware and software. And I realized that, you know what, this wasn't just a Cisco issue. This was a bigger issue that customers grapple with. And I saw an opportunity basically to build a tool set to make it easier, not just for us to manage our customers' environment and inventory, but to give our customers the ability to do a better job of managing it themselves. So today I'm going to walk you through our methodology. What we like to do is basically enlighten through data. So we collect information and collect data about your environment, and then we like to empower you by putting that data to use. And I'll walk through exactly what that means. Then we like to enable your environment so you're able to make decisions on things going forward, especially as it relates to not just maintenance, but, you know, what's the longevity and the life cycle of things that are inside my infrastructure. Now, if you saw the video that we posted on the invite here, we talk about savings. And I asked all of you to make sure you challenge me through this and talk about savings. And I got a Excel spreadsheet that I'm going to bring up at the end of this that looks at how we can save customers money. And I'll walk you through some of the details on that for being participants today. But we use this tool set not just to get you to that point, but also to manage some of that. So our engagement methodology, so enlighten, it's pretty simple. We work with our customers through data collection and consulting. And in the past, when we've done SmartNet renewals, I think most of you are familiar with, you know, us sending you a spreadsheet and saying, hey, this is what the vendor thinks you have, whether it's Cisco or somebody else, or this is what we had on record as of last year. What are the changes in your environment? Can you let us know what those are? And then we would sit down and we basically would build out, you know, what your to-be model for the next year, 2 years, or 3 years would look like from a support standpoint. Well, we found that that process was a bit flawed because the data that we're collecting is a lot of human intervention. And there are tools, I know a lot of our customers have tools in place that collect some of this data, but what we find is about 99.9% of the time, that data is not 100% correct. So when we collect this data, then we want to work with empowering you on how to make decisions around this. So we can look at an itemized roadmap. We see things like end of life, end of sale, end of support for items like Cisco, but our tool set is very vendor agnostic. I know a lot of you think of us as Cisco, but there's a lot of other things that we can provide as well. And we take this raw data, we turn it into information, and we give you web-based analytics that you can make decisions on your environment about in real time. The other thing is from an enabling standpoint, we look at the outcomes of this and we leverage our partnerships with other providers to make sure that we're getting you the best value that you can for your infrastructure as we work with you as a value-added reseller. I won't read all of this to you, but we use a combination of different tools combined with our own tool set here to basically help you ferret out the things in your environment and then make sure that you can take appropriate action. Now, let's talk about our data collection architecture. So our tool set that we're going to show you, OnePing, today, we used to call it the Combine. and you'll see our demo database is still called the Combine. The reason we call it the Combine is because we're combining basically two flavors of technology. We're combining a inventory discovery of our customer's environment, and we're bouncing that off vendor records in our contract management system. What that allows us to do is get a real view, real-world snapshot of what's in your environment and compare it to what vendors think you have or what even you think you have inside the environment. What this does is it eliminates false positives. It eliminates the cost that you would pay for items that aren't in your environment that are carried forward in the contract. The other thing it allows us to do is mitigate risk in your environment, because a lot of customers, and just, won't have you poll this, but how many of you ever picked up the phone, rhetorical question, and called Cisco or any vendor and said, I've got a broken part, here's the serial number, I need it replaced, and they go, sorry, that serial number's not on file, right? Well, we eliminate some of that. I call that the risk elimination side of this, because if it's a piece of critical equipment and you suffer downtime within your environment, that can cost you tens of thousands, even millions of dollars, depending on your business. From a data collection standpoint, we have a hardened appliance. Traditional engagements that we do are virtual appliances. We run in any type of virtual environment, KVM, Hyper-V, VMware. We prefer VMware, and I don't like to run this on laptops. We also have a physical appliance that can go into the environment that's hardened as well. It's a 30-minute setup process, and I'll show you a little bit of what that looks like today. We have an exhaustive agentless inventory discovery engine, and it does two things. It discovers things in the environment, and then it goes back and it inventories them. Now, I know a lot of you might be thinking, you know what, I've already got an investment in asset management tools or other tools that do some of this, and I'll give you some real-world scenarios as we go forward in this conversation. But I can tell you, we did an install about a month ago for a very large company here in Atlanta. It's global. And we installed on a Wednesday and did a follow-up on Thursday with the customer, full-blown install. So we saw everything, laptop, desktop, notebook, server, all the devices out there in the network, and all the software installed on laptops, desktops, notebooks, and servers. And this particular customer called us on Friday and said, hey, could you come out next Wednesday and present to our executive staff? And we said, sure, is there an issue? And they said, yeah. We actually have some Windows XP machines running in our environment, and we really need to make sure that we're covering ourselves here because we migrated off of XP December 31st. And we have found that these are virtualized machines running in production environment, and they have security vulnerabilities that your tool discovered that we didn't know about. And we bought an asset management tool 6 months ago that should have found this. And we want to figure out why. We'd like you to come in and take a look at this. So very open culture. They got everybody in the room and we sat down, and they were using a product by the name of Snow, by the way. And the fact that we're agentless, we were able to go back. There were 1,700 and some odd devices in the environment, laptops, desktops, notebooks, and servers. And we were able to show that Snow was only deployed on about 400. So they had a pretty substantial gap of that deployment. So they were still lagging a bit behind where they thought that they were fully deployed, but they had a little bit of a glitch in the software tools that were doing software delivery. We see that stuff. By the way, our tool set, since it's a discovery and inventory tool, we also see the presence of mobile devices. And just a little bit of background, my business partner in the development of this tool set has 13 years as a Microsoft SAM and understands the ins and outs of Microsoft incredibly well. So a couple things that we're looking at is, what's your mobility strategy, which is something we commonly ask here at Adcap. But on top of that, how does that impact things like my Microsoft licensing? If I've got device cows and every user's bringing in, an iPhone and then an iPad, and I already have a BlackBerry server with BEVs and I'm paying for all of that, how does that impact my software licensing? And on top of that today, as we roll through this, I'll show you some things about what we do for software that might enlighten you as well. We've built a software taxonomy engine around this, and we do a lot of neat things. So as we walk through, I'll show you what the tool set does. How do we turn this information into usable data? Well, we've got a ton of reports, and instead of walking through the slide deck, what I'd like to do now is just hop in and show you the tool itself. So I'll take my first breath. I wanted to get through that slide deck relatively quick so I could really dive into the real meat and potatoes around this presentation. So give it just a second. I'm bringing up another screen here to show you the tool set. Remember, I called this the Combine. What I'm going to show you first is our contract management system. Everything you see in the lower pane here on the left where it says Site Management, this is where we provide end data management for our customers where we haven't necessarily done an inventory. Everything above site management is where we have done an inventory, and all those inventory reports are available. Now, if you're an existing customer of ours, I'll tell you, we're actively loading your contracts into our system because we will use this to do contract management. This is a customer view, so this is an example of what a customer would see. You can do contract management without the full combined service of OnePing. We don't have to deploy our appliance. However, I'm going to show you today why you would want to do that. The other thing is, inside of our contract management system, I want you to see that we can manage anything. One of our reps on board, Todd McKinney, and I were out at one of our government agencies, and we showed this tool set, and they said, you know what, we'd like to show this to procurement. Is there a possibility that, procurement might be able to use this tool set as well, since it's a contract management system, we're doing everything via spreadsheet today? And our answer was absolutely. And they asked the question, okay, you're doing IP inventory management, we get that, but what if I want to manage my 50 police cars that are on a fleet lease, and I want to make sure that we're managing those assets appropriately? Is that something we could put in here? And the answer was absolutely. It's something we can provide as a service. So if there's anything that you needed to manage, we could take that on and manage it for you. When we talk about IT assets, I'm going to dig in on Cisco here in just a second. But inside of this view, and by the way, we're about to change, we've been talking about this, we're about to change the reporting structure here. But we give you the capability, you can sort by vendor, contract items, start date. A lot of our customers like to look at end date. And the methodology we used in the past is that anything that's not color-coded goes beyond 12 months. Well, we're going to change that because our customers said that gets confusing. The minute we put a contract in, it's automatically yellow. So we're going to make it 120 days will be yellow. So you know that you're in that 120-day renewal cycle, and it's time to start planning, right? We're in that planning phase. At the 60-day mark, we're going to go orange. So when it's orange, you're going to know that, you know what, I'm in that 60-day window. I really need to make sure I'm getting this thing done. When it goes red, as you see down here, then I know it's expired. We're going to work on an archiving mechanism to be able to archive this, but we're not going to delete your legacy contracts. And here's the reason why. We maintain cost analysis on the back end, and we're going to be able to show you what your costs are year to year through our solution set on what you actually put under contract. So we'll be able to give you that data. Now, as you look at these, I want to make sure I define exactly what these end dates are. This is a contract bucket or a container. This is where all the assets are housed, and the end date is your annual renewal date. It doesn't always mean the assets will 100% line up with that, just FYI. One of the things we're going to do is underneath the My Contracts window coming soon, you're going to actually be able to see under the My Contracts here, we're going to do a bar graph, and I'll show you that in just a second, some of the other instances here. But in that bar graph, we're going to show you where your assets expire. So they may not be linked to a contract, but you're able to pull meaningful data out of here. And there's a ton of reasons why. Maybe they're in an end of life, end of sale on a support cycle, you only renewed them for 7 months, or for various reasons we didn't coach them, or you bought something that didn't line up in a contract year. So think about this annual contract, or this bucket is basically your annual renewal or multi-year renewal. By the way, I will tell you, I know there's some government institutions on the line with us, and you manage your budgets differently than private sector does. I would say for all of our customers, as you're working with our reps, ask about when the right time is for renewing things like Cisco contract maintenance. I was at Cisco for 5.5 years, and I'll tell you, I would always recommend to a customer renew in July, because that's Cisco's end of year. Not saying you're going to get a deal, but if you're ever going to get a deal, it's going to be at their end of year. So, and we can give visibility and help you manage to that. So let's dive into this. So here I have our contract management system. As a best practice, as this opens up, as a best practice, inside of the notes, we're putting the support number in here for you to be able to call the vendor. Now, I'm sure everybody knows the number to Cisco or IBM or HP and all these NetApp and all these big vendors, but what about little things like Mobile Iron? Or maybe we sold you a support contract for a call recording solution like Zoom or Workforce Management. If we have that under management for you, that would go in here with the contact information. So if something broke or you needed vendor support, of course you could always call us. But if you wanted that one number to call 24/7, it's available to you here inside the portal. So we do that as a best practice. In some cases on the smaller ones, we're putting expanded notes out here to talk about the assets. Now here I can click on Show Contract Items. If we're just doing contract management, this is going to be a mashup between what you think you have in your environment, your spreadsheet, and what we think are the vendor thinks you have in the environment, our spreadsheet. And traditionally what we have done is we've sat down as we've looked at this data and passed spreadsheets back and forth to try and clean it up. Well, in this instance, you can see that there's some yellow in here underneath the serial number field. Anytime that you see yellow in our solution, you know that we have actively done a scan of the environment. And everywhere that you see yellow is where there's assets on the contract that are not seen in your environment. Now, I say not seen. We might not be seeing the entire network, so we would sit down with your technical team and make sure we're seeing all the network. You might have spares or something sitting on a shelf that's, there, and we would say, well, why would you want to cover a spare, right? If you have it sitting out there, don't put maintenance on it until it goes in, and we can help manage to that. And this top line, this was actually our environment. We had a telepresence server in here. We have two, but we had a telepresence server in here that somehow along the way, a serial number, either distribution or Cisco, wasn't available, and somebody just fat-fingered there, I'm going to put a dummy serial number here and I'll catch it up later on. And we caught that in our own environment. So in that case, that would have been a risk to us if that would have failed at 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. The other items, though, that you see here in yellow, like I said, these are items that aren't in the environment. These are things that I would not renew. And I'll tell you, we've done a lot of these discovery assessments, and we find a lot of yellow in customers' environments, meaning we're finding stuff that would normally be renewed on a contract that they don't have. And that's the stuff that we clean off. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody, but that's only half of the equation. I call that the 50% rule. That's the, I shouldn't pay for stuff that's not inside of my environment. And by the way, we see in a lot of cases, customers are renewing every year items that are not in their environment just because we don't have the intelligence and we don't know. On top of that, we're able to take a look at items that are in the environment that aren't showing up on the vendor contract. So I'll just expand this out for you. Here you can see that I've got, I've got a router. So I've got a Cisco 2911 here that could be a voice router. If that's the voice router in my headquarters location and it's not covered on SmartNet and it fails Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock and I pick up the phone and I call Cisco and then Adcap, may not be covered. Now, what we do as a best practice is we dump this report out to Excel and we go back to Cisco and run what's called a sniff report. So sometimes, Frank Ball Incorporated might actually show up as FBI, right? It might show up as something else that's in their system that doesn't equate to the name. Well, we go look for that. And if it's just a naming convention thing, then we get Cisco to change it. In some cases, we find that stuff carried forward and either distribution or Cisco, somebody didn't properly entitle this stuff. So this is our way on the back end of making sure we clean up and fix it. If it was bought and maintenance wasn't properly applied or it doesn't have maintenance on it, this is our opportunity to sit down with you and say, here's some critical items that should be covered, right? Let's get this added to the contract. Our intent is to make sure that as we go forward, that this report here, at the end of this contract renegotiation period, that everything in here gets cleaned up, is gray, and we have at least a starting point master record for the years to come. So even if you didn't do an inventory discovery or you did a one-time discovery, at least it's cleaned up. On top of that, and I'll tell you one more thing on Cisco, on top of that, the other thing that we have the capability to see in the environment is your end of life, end of sale, end of support on items that are physically inside of your infrastructure. Now, we see this for Cisco out of the box. Cisco is one of the vendors out there that actually announces end of life, end of sale, and support. And by the way, there's that pretty bar graph that I told you I was going to show you. The neat thing on this is we can click on last day of support here. Notice if I come over here to the centerpiece, and I'm just going to wait for the WebEx to catch up, I'm going to sort by last day of support, and you'll see that I can see the items that are in red are no longer supported, and I have 31 items that I can't even buy SmartNet on anymore. That's stuff that I'd want to replace right away. On top of that, this gives me the capability to view out, by the way, when Cisco announces end of life, that means that we're going to stop manufacturing it. I still have stuff in the production queue, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sell that gear out. So about 90 days later, it will go end of sale. From that point forward, they will support that equipment for 5 years. So you get a 5-year life cycle on that equipment. Our tool gives you the capability to see that life cycle move forward and say, okay, you know what? In the next 12 to 24 months, I've got 87 items out there that I'm going to need to replace and upgrade because the vendor's no longer going to support it. This gives you a time to react and put a capital budget together. From our standpoint, we can be a better trusted advisor because it gives us the capability to sit down with you and talk about emerging technologies or newer technologies that you might want to migrate to, and we can leverage Cisco's technology migration program and get you a trade-in value against that legacy equipment. So this really gives us the capability to be a better business partner for you and give you the ability to plan your budgets going forward so you don't have surprises. By the way, this is real data, and this was a customer's environment that they actually had this gear in their environment. There's 31 items that were expired. And I don't know if any of you have 6500s, but there was 13 of them in this environment, right? So, you know, some big data here that we're showing you. Now, what's even more important, and where I get excited, is the level of detail that we do on inventory. So I talked about discovery. Well, let's take a look at what we do for inventory. When we inventory a device, we pull as much data about that device as we can. So here I've got the host name, I've got make, model, serial number, I've got the version of iOS that's running on it, and I also have every single one of the installed components down to the serial number. So in this case, they have the serial number of the power supplies. A lot of times when you call into TAC and you're looking at getting support, sometimes they balk a little bit, even on main if you have a main chassis and there's an internal item, they might say, you know, we're not showing that item. Here you have the capability to go back and show that that item is physically in place and running. All you have to do is tell Cisco, hey, here's the serial number, this box is covered. If you don't believe me, you launch a WebEx and I'll show you. And you've got a tool set that gives you the capability to do that. On top of that, even more, is this particular device's end of life and a sale and support. Our architects are super versed in these technologies, and they know what line cards in here are still supported that we can migrate out and put into a new chassis and save you tens of thousands of dollars. By the way, a 6500 is about a $100,000 starting point. And in this case, you know, we know that we've got some line cards that would migrate. I've seen examples where we've gone in and done this before, and the customer's in the middle of a migration where they bought all new chassis, right? So they overspent, you know, the tune of you know, potentially $1 million on buying new chassis as opposed to, you know, just buying what they needed. By the way, I'll show you that we have the capability. I'm going to click up here on SNMP devices, and that'll be the last thing I tell you on Cisco. From an inventory standpoint, we do pretty deep dives, and if I take a look at even a Cisco, you know, 2511 router, if I dive into that router, what you'll see is we're pulling back things like the WIC card. We're pulling back, if it's a voice router, we're going to have the serial numbers of the PVDM. So there's the PVDM 248, right? And this is the transcoding module that you'll see here in just a second. It's catching up. There we go. I see the high-speed WAN interface card that they're using as an extra port to uplink. I see the actual GBIC that's connected in that high-speed interface card to uplink this into the core. So a lot of rich, deep, detailed data, and where we are very different from a lot of the other product sets out there that you might look at is we're not a network management tool. We're an inventory tool that ties back to contract management to eliminate cost and mitigate risk. So and we call this perpetual contract management, where there's not really a product in the marketplace that does it today. So I'm going to take my second deep breath, and I'm going to move beyond Cisco. I'm going to show you the warranty status report, and now you're going to see what we do around physical endpoints. And in our warranty status report, we are connected out of the box via APIs to Dell, HP, IBM, Apple, and Lenovo. And we have the capability to see endpoints and servers, printers, other networking devices. You know, God forbid you have them, but if you did, we're able to see those by those vendors and whether they're still supported. So I'll just show you real quick that IBM, of course, makes servers. They're IBM System X. And what I have the capability to do here, if I do a search for IBM System, I can see in this environment all the IBM System X. If I click on Start Date, I can see the original in-service date of these boxes because this particular, in all the vendors, actually the first warranty coverage date is the in-service production date. And we see all the way back to the in-service date on this, and I'll show you servers here in just a second that go all the way back to 2003 in the environment. So in this particular case, we've got 10 entries, it's about 7 servers because we duplicate on some of it. Only one has warranty. So if I click on this and I dive into that machine, what you're going to see from an inventory standpoint is that I see make, model, serial number. I see the number, speed, and type of the CPUs, and it's coming up. I see the amount of memory installed. And then here from the manufacturer, I'm able to see the base warranty and any additional contract information on stuff that they put on with the vendor. Now, I see vendor stuff only. If this was done via third party or something else, I wouldn't see it, but you know, we don't sell third-party maintenance here, but if you happen to have that, we could still build a contract around that for you to be able to validate that things that you put on contract are actually physically in the environment. And I'll show you that in just a second. I'll show you where we've done HP CarePack support contracts for servers, where we've done IBM support contracts around servers, and we can show if they're in the inventory or not in the inventory. So it shows you where to save money. On top of that, I'll just dig a little bit deeper here as I scroll down. Since we're doing an inventory, we inventory all of the software that's running on the machine. And I'll tell you why that's important in just a second as we talk about some of the software stuff that we do. So I'll just click back on the warranty status over here, and I'll show you, just so there's no smoke and mirrors, I'll show you how we do this for HP, and I'll show you as well how we do that for IBM. And by the way, you know it's for Cisco, and we have a great relationship with Cisco. There's not anything in the environment, we're a value-added reseller, there's not anything in your environment that we can't sell maintenance support on. So if you had things like HP servers in your environment, in this case I'll just do a quick search for ProLiant, and I'll click on Start Date. And again, you'll see in the demo database here that there's 9 entries that are showing up in here, and I have 1 server that's actually being covered under maintenance. And if I dig into it, you'll see the in-service date there goes all the way back to 2006. But as I dive into this, then you're going to see the same thing that I showed you around IBM. You'll see make, model, serial number, number of CPUs installed, amount of memory. You're going to see the HP CarePack that's in here. Now, if you're an HP customer, I'm not pulling the SED and the SAR. I'm just telling you there's a CarePack out there when the expiration date is. But I give you better visibility to manage this. By the way, we had a customer that is an HP direct customer. All their endpoints, all their servers are all HP. They wanted this data because HP couldn't tell them when their warranties expired. And they were buying CarePacks and overlaying CarePacks on top of their warranty. The issue with that is that they were overpaying for stuff that they didn't need to, number one. Number two, on a server, if you have an expiration, in some cases HP is going to make you go back and put day 1 support on that, which is about, you know, half the price more of just having a standard HP CarePack support contract on a server. So they use this tool set to actually help better manage their HP environment and save them some dollars. So just figured I'd show you all that. The last thing I'll show you inside the tool set, just around, you know, some of the stuff we pull on servers is, since we're pulling all the software inventory inside of this environment, by the way, I can show Dell if anybody wants to see it, just, you know, ask that question if you're a Dell shop. But since we're pulling all the software, I have the capability, we're connected to the National Defense Security Database for software vulnerabilities, over 2 million threats out there, and we can see in real time what the threats are inside of your environment from a security standpoint, and we even show you the remediation steps. So, you know, in this particular example, in this first one, I see I've got a Microsoft Silverlight threat. If I click here on this link, what it's going to do is it's actually going to take me to the actual remediation steps by the vendor on what I would need to do to remediate this vulnerability. So it shows me that, and then if I were to go back to the particular assets, and I clicked on the assets up here, then it's going to show me all the machines that are affected by that vulnerability, and if I'm using any type of tool to do endpoint management or software updates, now I've got the capability, I know all the machines that are impacted by that, I can preload this in a change management window, and then when those users log in, then I can automatically make sure that I'm pushing that software update and eliminating that threat vulnerability. Now, this wouldn't replace, you know, the things you're doing for antivirus, the other stuff that's out there. This would be a second set of eyes that comes with our tool set, right? So we have a lot of customers ask, you know, is this an end-all be-all? Can you do security management? No. We're just taking information we collect about the environment and turning that, our data, and turning that into usable information. One of the things we found recently, by the way, and we had a customer ask this, we had a customer, very, very large financial institution, looking at doing the inventory piece because they were in the middle of coming up on a Microsoft audit that they knew that they were going to have. And as we went through the demo of the tool set, they said, you know what do you guys do for SSL certificate management? Do you have the capability to do this? And we never thought about it. But the truth of the matter is that we pull data from port 443 in a passive manner, and we're able to see stuff that's issued via a certificate authority internally or externally. And we see the start date and end dates on those certificates. So for this particular customer, by the way, where applications were basically falling off the face of the earth that were revenue generating, now the customer can take almost 6,000 SSL certificates, and they can sort on end date and make sure that those are renewed prior to an application or some sort of application service going offline. So just another way that we take data, right, that we have available and make it usable from an information standpoint. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually dive in and show you our OnePing appliance. So this is our dev box. So I'll just dive in here real quick and kind of show you some of the cool things that we do inside of the box itself. I won't show you the setup, but I will show you something that I think is an incredibly cool feature set around this tool. So one of the things that we have the capability to do, since we have software inventory, is we can start to build software application groups as it relates to entitlement. Out of the box, we've already done all the structure for Microsoft and Adobe, just so you know, because, by the way, they're some of the ones that are coming in and do the audits, or they do the true-ups, and they have the biggest impact to the environment. If you saw in the last window, and I won't slide over there right now, but if you saw in the last window, I actually had some reports in there for SQL and other stuff. One of the questions that we just got, by the way, is how does this tool set differ from other things that I might have inside of my environment? That's a great question. The first thing that I'll tell you is there's a lot of inventory or asset management tools that are out there, but they don't always collect all the hardware and software from an inventory management standpoint. They're not always looking at the network and pulling network stuff back. I traditionally have something that does network. They will have something that does endpoint management and software management, but they don't link to the vendors to be able to tell you warranty status, and they can't link back to a contract to tell me if things are covered. And in most cases, they're doing cost management for assets on the books, but they don't know if those assets are really in the environment, right, to make sure that I'm covered, or they even, you know, the things that should be on the books that might not be there. So that's a big area where we differ. Great question that just came in. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you the software taxonomy engine. So I'm just going to dive into Microsoft for a second. Here under Microsoft, we created a product group called Office. And inside of Office, you're going to see that we've got 3 different flavors of Office installed in this customer's environment: Office Enterprise, Office Professional, and Office Standard. If I dive into this, you'll see that I have the capability to say, okay, you know, what's installed in the environment. It's going to do a search here real quick, and I'm able to add and include applications over here and even prioritize them based on version level. The other thing is, and I should have showed you this with Adobe, Adobe has a multitude of different products: Photoshop, Acrobat. Some of those products have a cost associated with them, some of them don't. So we're able to go in here and have includes and don't includes as it relates to cost. So I can ignore other applications in this instance that I might have in the environment that don't carry a cost but would show up as a false positive in an audit. In this particular case, I've got Office Standard. There's 2 versions we found in the customer's environment. We added them, 2007 and 2010. And I've got a license cost of $327 an application, and we did some analytics with the customer on how they're licensed, and they're licensed for 85 installs. So I'll update that product, and the neat thing about this is I'm just going to click on Add Product for a second. I won't do it, but as I click on this, what you'll see is, that's not where I want it to be. Forgive me. I'm just going to go back to software taxonomy for a second. One of the things that we have to do around that application is we can tell it, for Microsoft as an example, I can have multiple installs on a single box. So I can tell it, ignore duplicates, and if I'm entitled to downgrade rights, I can say, you know what, automatically apply downgrade rights. Now, I'm going to pause there for a second. You don't know Adcap is a Microsoft reseller, and by the way, we're not. what we've done with this tool set is we try to create more value for our customers. And by the way, this is where we can become a bit of a trusted advisor, because we don't sell Microsoft, we don't sell enterprise agreements. You'd be buying that traditionally maybe from a LAR. But we're going to give you useful information that no one else on the planet really is doing. Unless you go to Microsoft and you get a one-time snapshot of their tool coming in and doing this, and by the way, if it's Microsoft doing it, it's kind of the fox guarding the hen house, right? Because they're incented when they do an audit to kind of find, potentially where you're out of compliance. This tool gives you that view, and as I build these groups, I can eliminate false positives, I can apply downgrade rights, and if you have this tool set running in your environment in real time, you have the capability to come back and look at the taxonomy of the software inside your environment and the impact. So in this particular case for Microsoft, here I'm running 3 different versions of Office. You can see that I own 4,854 copies of Office Professional, but I've installed 5,666. So I basically am over-installed by 812 copies at $547 a pop, which is going to cost me about $444,000 in an audit. So that's I probably don't want that surprise. Conversely, Office Standard, I've got 82 copies here that I'm not using. So I might want to go back and look at my enterprise and my pro customers and say, why am I using that version? And will a lower version count? Or should I even have that installed on those devices? By the way, we did this for a very large bank not too long ago. And what we found was they were doing a standard image for all machines in their environment, and all their bank tellers that never use Word, never use PowerPoint, never use Excel, had that installed on the branch teller machines. Well, guess what? That's a cost. Even in an enterprise agreement, you're licensed for a certain amount of the applications. It's not an all-you-can-eat. They make you think it's an all-you-can-eat until you come up to that first true-up, and then you find out it's not. So I'll just scroll down here. You'll see that we do this for operating systems as well. So we're able to see it. Visio is a big one. Project is a big one. We're able to show all of that. And you could do this for any application inside the environment. So we have customers that have Autodesk, that have AutoCAD, that have Adobe, and we're able to show a lot of that stuff in real time. So I've got 17 minutes left, and I've shown you guys basically a quick overview of our tool set and the data and information that it provides. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to go back to that conversation that we did in that little infomercial for you of 15 minutes can save you 30%. So how do we use this tool set to drive out savings? One of the first things that I showed you in our contract management system was we can eliminate things that you would automatically renew that aren't in the environment that you're paying for. And by the way, that varies. I'm not going to put a number on that. I'm not going to give that a big percentage, right? But we think that traditionally we find it's about 8 to 10% of the inventory is stuff that hangs around for a year or two that's not in the environment that you buy maintenance on. And it's got a cost associated with it. So we can eliminate that, number one. Number two, risk elimination. I'm not doing any calculations because everybody on this call is different. But if you experience a service outage because you have equipment in your environment that's not covered, there's a real cost associated with that. I'm not even going to focus on that. What I am going to do is I'm going to pull up our cost analysis table, and we've got some secret sauce in here. I'm not going to tell you what all that is because we would do this through a consultation and discovery process. But what I will tell you is you look at this, and I'll just expand it out just a little bit so everybody can see it, is that we have a methodology, hopefully everybody can see my screen, where we can flatline some of the costs around your maintenance. Now, some of the government entities that are out here might say, you know what, we're not able to do a multi-year agreement. I'll tell you we've done it for government agencies. State and local government, we've done it before, and in the past we've even done it for some federal government stuff. So it's not uncommon to be done, and if you think about it, some of you lease vehicles multi-year, right? So you are doing multi-year agreements. You might just not have done this in the past around hardware maintenance. Let me tell you how some of this works. So every manufacturer out there, their mean time between failure as equipment ages goes up, number one. Cisco's very different. Cisco, one of the reasons that people buy Cisco is because they continue to enhance that product set. They're always doing upgrades, right? Now a phone, the cost of support for a phone hasn't gone up since 2003. I can tell you, list price for a handset's $8, and it's still $8 today on the standard handset. because there's no logic behind it. But if you have ASAs or have PIXs or have routers, even some of their switches, they continue to roll out things like ICE. They continue to roll out additional services, IP, SIP, IP trunking, all of this stuff. Well, they use some of those SmartNet dollars to fund R&D, and they give that back to you for ownership of having that product set and buying SmartNet, right? So they refund into it. And their product goes up anywhere from 5 to 15%, just like everybody else in the industry, year over year. So what we have the capability to do is we can finance and co-term everything in your environment beyond 1 year. We can go out 36 months, 48 months, even 60 months. And what that does for you, if you're in procurement, if you do anything around IT budgeting, or if you're a CIO, I can flatline your budget for everything that's in the environment today for the next 3 to 5 years. So you know if your annual renewal is this customer and it's $456,000 a year, then you're only going to pay $456,000 a year. In this particular case, by the way, for this customer, if you do the compounded annual growth at about 7%, you're going to eliminate about $239,000 in costs over the next 5 years by doing that. And a lot of customers don't think about that, right? They just pay annually and they move on and they move on and they move on. But we can structure a deal and flatline your costs and 0% finance this. Now, I've had customers come back and say, well, can't I just prepay this up front and get a better discount? Yes, we're using that prepaid discount. We are with Cisco Capital to buy your interest rate down to 0. If you want to prepay, we pass that savings on to you, but you assume risk when you do that. Let me explain why. Cisco's a great company, not going anywhere. I love them. You probably love them as well. But if you have a falling out and you want to get out of this agreement, you've already paid for all that maintenance up front. If you do a 0% finance, you're paying year to year for support that you're going to get. So you would pay today for the next year, just like you would normally do. Next year, you're going to pay for the next year, but it's flat rated. If you have a falling out with Cisco, you have some negotiation power to go back and say, you know what, I'm not going to pay for those, quote, unused rents on support on this gear because I'm migrating away from Cisco. Now, it's never going to happen, but it is a way to eliminate some risk. And that's how we can flatline the cost. And you have to look at your cost of capital. But I can tell you, I've met with customers that have very large environments and big iron. They say, my annual increase rate is about 12% on average. So, I don't know what your cost of capital is, but 12% is a pretty good interest rate these days, and that's not bad to get 0% finance. On the other side of this, we can engage and look at how you're doing support with this data and make better recommendations on ways that we can modify the support agreement and eliminate even more costs. And I call that the secret sauce because we're not just going to openly give that away, right? Some of you work with some of our competitive vendors, and I will tell you each time that we do this and sit down with a customer, the feedback that I hear from them is that, wow, you're telling me about stuff that I haven't heard about before, and you're educating them on things that, I haven't heard from other vendors. And by the way, some of this stuff is even new to us. We sat down and looked at what this tool set can provide for us, for our customers, and we're modifying our approach in the way that we work with our customers today, just FYI. So in this particular case, we took a 456 annual renewal and drove about $100,000 of cost out of year 1 and eliminated it for 5 years for a savings of about $700,000. We did a couple other little things in here for the customer, but if you look at the net savings, on a $456,000 annual renewal, over 5 years, we were able to save about $640,000. If this is of interest to you, then I would suggest pick up the phone, call your sales rep, let's sit down and let's engage, and let's talk about some of this stuff in detail on how we can help you better flatline some of this maintenance. Now, this is Cisco. We also have the capability to do this for other vendors. And it starts with that discovery in the environment and taking a look at what you have and allowing us to work with you to become more of a trusted advisor, take a consultative role. Now, one common thing that I've heard, and I'll go ahead and pull the 800-pound elephant into the room, is some of you might be thinking, well, Adcap, this is great. I know you're for Cisco, but this other stuff you don't sell. Does that give you a competitive advantage if you have that data? Absolutely not. It's your data. However you decide to use that data in an RFP, whatever, that's fine. You can share it openly. What I would say is, why aren't other vendors doing this? Why don't other vendors have contract management solutions inside of here where you have a portal where you can see the things that you have under maintenance that are being supported by that vendor? It's a service that we're going to provide openly for you today, going forward, that you should mandate inside your RFPs when you're asking to buy a new piece of equipment or even build a relationship with a reseller. So we don't think it's necessarily a competitive advantage. We think that all customers should demand this capability going forward. And there's a lot of vendors that provide it, but they charge for it. If you're a customer of ours, we're going to give it to you for things that we sell. Are there any questions around this tool set? We have about 9 minutes for Q&A, and I do appreciate your time today, but I want to make sure that we make this as valuable as possible. So with that, I'll just go ahead and turn it back over to our team here and see if there's any questions.
Frank, so you showed us a demo of the tool itself.
Yes, ma'am.
What is actually required to get that set up?
Great question. So we need a few things. And by the way, anybody that's interested, we have a canned email that comes out. Our documentation is very robust, and people learn visually. So we put together about a 12-minute video that shows you the absolute entire install process. Things we need from the customer. Number one, you need to know all of your IP subnets, because we need to scan those IP subnets to find devices in the environment. We need your SNMP community strings. And by the way, we've done this where SNMP is not configured on everything. Don't worry about it. We have the capability to fingerprint what that device is. And by the way, a common one we see a lot is FI big IP. And for some reason, I don't know why, but a lot of customers just don't apply the community strings or turn on SNMP. We find those devices for the customer, and they're able to go back and enable SNMP. For Cisco, we see if it's a switch or a router, or whatever it is in the environment. We tell them the IP address, and what the machine is. We just aren't able to inventory it. They go back and enable SNMP, and they do the cleanup, right? So even if SNMP is not totally configured in your environment, if you have 1,500 assets, we can show you the 35 or 40 assets that need to be touched, as opposed to trying to comb through logs and records to find all of that. So we help with that. The second thing is we need a set of Windows credentials. We ask that our customers actually create an account for this discovery tool. And we need admin privilege, an admin account, domain admin account with local machine rights, read-only access. We're using about 7 different protocols for discovery, and we're using about 5 for inventory. The number one we're using is RegQ. And RegQ gives us the capability with anything logging in the domain to be able to read the registry of the device and pull back all the hardware asset inventory, and then we can also pull the software asset inventory as well. So those are the 2 requirements, and all of that is in our setup configuration guide. We run the VM. You don't have to create a VM. We had one customer actually not watch the video and create a Windows VM for us. We're like, no. There's an OVF template. If you're a VMware environment, whatever it is, KVM, Hyper-V, we can send you the template. It's a hardened appliance. You just get it up and running in a management VLAN. Your fingers on the keyboard, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, we are not. We get on a WebEx with you. When we get on the call, we issue your license key for the appliance, and then from a discovery standpoint, you get a test drive of this for 60 days. So we issue a 60-day license, and you get all the power of the tool set for 60 days to see if it's something that's usable inside of your environment. We would use that to do contract cleanup for SmartNet and work with you to make sure that we get that thing, all those items cleaned up and get you all gray as opposed to yellow. At the 60 days, if you decide you want to go forward, then we can give you a proposal to leave that tool set on and to do that service that we call perpetual contract management, which gives you full-time hardware software inventory, and then we can build contracts around, managing the IT assets inside of your environment. Common question we get is how much? It's per manageable node on the network. I see storage, but I don't have any way to log into it or inventory it. So a storage array, even though I can see it, I don't know all the installed components of it. That's not an asset to us, right? So we wouldn't charge for that. If there are things that we can't log into, that we're not able to glean information about, we don't charge for those. It's only the devices. We look at an endpoint count, and then all the devices in SNMP we're pulling inventory on, and we sell this in block tiers. So if you have 1,500 devices in your environment, 15 to 16, and you're growing, then we would sell you a block license from 1,500 to 2,000 assets on an annual contract. And by the way, we know the customers shrink and that they grow, so you're able to scale in that 12-month period to the next level up or the next level down. If you go down 2 levels, because you have divestiture or something, or you go up 2 levels, then we would come back out and renegotiate with you, right, and then give you that tiered pricing.
Wonderful. Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, we had one other question. They were just wondering how long does it typically take to see the results?
That's a great question. From a networking standpoint, networks are static. Depending on the size of the environment, we're traditionally 24 to 48 hours. We've captured the majority of the network. Now, we've done installs where the customers have global data centers, and the largest one we've done is 12 appliances in 12 disparate data centers across the globe, and we're able to do multi-site inventory and multi-site administration, meaning a site administrator can have a login into our portal and they can see only the stuff that's in their environment. At the corporate level, they could see everything aggregated up, so we pull it all together. In those large deployments, it can take up to a week. Assets. So we like to keep it running for 60 days because think about laptop users. They come and they go. If you have contractors and consultants coming in, our appliance recognizes stale data devices. So we have a stale data device report. And if something's only there, one time, we don't see it for 30 days, it goes in that report and you can look at it and say, was that my asset or a consultant or a contractor? We have problem device reports so we can see that. But traditionally on a networking standpoint, 24 to 48 hours, networks are flat, we see them. It's that 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 week cycle where we're capturing, laptops or mobile devices where end users are roving and coming in and out of the environment. Great question. Any other questions?
Frank, it doesn't look like any more questions are coming in. Again, everyone, thank you for attending and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.